I smelled the lobby before I saw him polished wood citrus cleaner and the faint bite of expensive cologne that wasn't mine. The elevator chimed, and Jason stepped out smoothing his tie, his smile tilted toward a blonde who leaned into him like she already had the right. My dress, the one he once said made me look like the girl he fell for, felt suddenly heavy against my ribs. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "Headed to your business trip?" I asked, and the marble floor carried my words farther than I meant them to go. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight, and tap like and subscribe if these true family stories keep you company. Your support helps more than you know. My name is Mariah. I'm 30, and Houston has been home for 8 years, long enough to learn where the power runs in a room and who believes they own it. I wasn't born here. I grew up 2 states east in a brick house where my mother taught that loyalty is proved in quiet ways, and my father measured love in steady work. I carried those lessons into adulthood like a second spine. Be dependable. Be patient. Be the person people can count on when the bill comes due. That was the woman Jason met when I was 22, and he was already shaking hands, chasing commissions, talking about how we'd build something bigger than luck. He was charisma in a pressed shirt, and he made the future sound like a room he could open with a smile. When he asked me to move to Houston for his promotion, I packed my hatchback and told my parents it was our chance. I took the first marketing job I could find, picked up freelancing at night, and when the market kicked us in the teeth that first year, I covered the mortgage with the small inheritance my grandmother left me. It never felt like sacrifice. It felt like partnership, his ambition, my steadiness, our life. We ate on a folding table for 6 months and laughed like we were rich. On the surface, we grew into the couple people pointed to at neighborhood barbecues, the tidy lawn, the weekend trips he booked with reward points, the framed photos in the hallway that made us look candid and happy. He promised children when timing made sense, and I believed him, circling names in my head, like prayers I'd eventually say out loud. The busy seasons at his office got busier than constant. My days ran between clients and care for my 17-year-old niece Ava, who'd been staying with me since my sister's treatment started taking more than they gave. I didn't resent the load. I was proud of it. I told myself we were building toward the same sky, but harmony started to sound like a chorus I couldn't quite hear from the back row. I noticed the unfamiliar perfume on a collar and told myself it lived in the air of every hotel bar. Texts came late. Client dinner ran over traffic's a mess. Don't wait up, and I let them pass like weather. When a credit card alert pinged for a downtown Marriott 2 nights with champagne added, Jason said it was a client booking he processed through his card. "Just something they comp, sometimes, babe." He smiled too fast when he said it. I tucked the detail away, promised myself I wasn't the kind of woman who searched for reasons to doubt. The truth is, I was very good at making sense of things that hurt. I rerouted disappointment into errands and made dinner anyway. I told Ava to finish her homework and turned the ringer up loud just in case he called. My sister Claire isn't built for pretending. After Thanksgiving, she pulled me aside and said, "Rhea, I saw him. He wasn't alone." I asked her to let it go and drove home stiff-armed and silent, the way my father used to grip the wheel when the weather turned. Then my niece, being a teenager with a sharp eye, scrolled past a rooftop photo Jason, a glass in his hand, leaning into a woman whose hair caught the light like a dare. The image didn't wind me. It emptied me, and the empty filled with something steadier than rage. I stopped asking questions that invited a lie. I counted the receipts I could prove money from my grandmother and our deed my name on the title. The months I carried us while he climbed ladders, he pretended belonged to both of us. On the afternoon of my 30th birthday, when his call came with a breathless line about an emergency trip, I said, "Okay," and set my phone down on the counter like it was finished with me. I took the dress he once chose for me off the hanger, curled my hair with the iron I saved for Sundays, and called a car into downtown. By the time I stepped into that lobby and chose a velvet chair facing the elevators, I knew two things with the kind of clarity that leaves no room for shaking. First, that the life I thought we shared would never return to me in the shape I gave it. And second, that if he meant to humiliate me in secret, he was about to learn what it felt like to be seen. When the elevator doors opened and Jason came out with her, the marble carried my silence farther than any accusation could. I crossed my legs, folded my hands over my purse, and waited for him to decide whether to meet my eyes or keep walking. The night I left the hotel lobby, the air felt sharp against my skin, the way cold glass feels when pressed to your lips too long. I walked until the sound of my heels gave me something steady to hold on to. But once I shut the door of the car and the driver pulled away, silence wrapped around me, and I couldn't ignore what the silence said anymore. Jason hadn't betrayed me in a single moment. It had been a series of cracks, each one small enough to deny until they finally broke through all at once. The first cracks had shown themselves years earlier, but I buried them beneath excuses. I remembered the Thanksgiving when Claire pulled me aside in my mother's kitchen. Her voice was low, but her eyes didn't flinch. "Raya, I saw him," she told me. He wasn't alone. I snapped back at her, told her she was imagining things, and left in a storm of anger that wasn't meant for her. The whole drive home, I kept my eyes on the road, whispering to myself that loyalty meant trust. But her words sat in me like a shard I couldn't spit out. Ava was the one who tore the wound wide. She wasn't even trying to hurt me, just a teenager scrolling through her phone laughing at posts I didn't understand. Then she froze her thumb hovering over the screen and held it out like it was a secret she couldn't carry alone. Jason, standing on a rooftop, a glass raised in his hand, leaning into a woman with hair that caught the string lights overhead. No caption, just emojis aflame a heart. But it was enough. Ava's voice was quiet when she called Claire, and Claire's voice was steady when she called me. "You can't keep pretending you don't see it." I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone in my lap until the screen blurred. It wasn't only the photo. It was every night I waited at the table with dinner growing cold. It was the perfume on his collar that I convinced myself lived in every hotel lobby. It was every time he said, "I'm doing this for us," while taking more and more of me away. I felt grief, yes, but beneath it came something sharper, an understanding that I had been complicit in my own erasure by staying silent. The weeks leading up to my birthday made everything harder to deny. Jason's texts grew shorter, his excuses rehearsed, and his absence longer. I noticed how he lingered with his phone in other rooms, how his smile felt like a mask slipping too easily into place. One night, I confronted him about the charge at the Marriott. He said it was for a client, waved it off with that quick grin he thought was charming. I wanted to believe him, so I did, but not without keeping the details tucked away. I told myself I wasn't the kind of woman who checked receipts, but maybe I should have been all along. By the time my birthday arrived, the illusion I'd carried for 8 years had thinned so much it barely covered the truth. His call came at 3 in the afternoon. The words were clipped, practiced. Something came up at work. Last-minute trip. "Don't be mad. I'll make it up to you when I get back." I listened, but what I heard wasn't explanation, it was dismissal. When he hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even yell. Instead, I felt certainty press down on me, with a weight so heavy it almost steadied me. I knew exactly where he was going. I wasn't going to sit at home in the dress he once called his favorite, waiting for another lie to circle back. I called a car and rode into downtown, the city lights flashing across the window like warnings I should have read years earlier. When I stepped into the Marriott lobby and sat facing the elevators, I wasn't just waiting for him, I was waiting for myself. For the woman I had set aside in the name of loyalty, for the strength I thought I'd lost under all the excuses. and then the elevator opened. Jason stepped out, adjusting his tie, his face bright with a smile meant for someone else. Behind him, she appeared a woman with blonde hair and an outfit meant to be noticed. She laughed at something he whispered, clinging to his arm, as if she had a claim. My heart pounded, but my face stayed still. When I stood, her voice slipped first. "Jason?" she asked, startled. His face drained, and his hand fell from her waist as though burned. The silence in that lobby was louder than any accusation. I asked if he was headed to his business trip, and the sound of my heels echoed as I closed the distance between us. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene beyond the one he had already written for us. My words were even my eyes steady. And then my hand connected with his cheek, the sound cracking across the marble like a verdict. Gasps rose from strangers, and his mistress stepped back, retreating from the shame that clung to him. I leaned close low enough for only him to hear, and told him this would be the last time he blindsided me. From here on, I would be the one in control. Then I walked out, my head high, my body trembling, only once the doors closed behind me. That night, when I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, I thought about the years I had given him, the money I'd poured into our home, the jobs I'd taken to keep us afloat, the loyalty I had offered without condition. I realized those weren't sacrifices lost to me. They were investments I still had the power to claim. The humiliation I felt in that lobby began to shift into something steadier, colder. He thought that night was the one he broke me. He had no idea it was the night I began planning how to break him. I closed my eyes and let the stillness of the house settle into me. For the first time in years, I didn't wait for the sound of his car in the driveway. I didn't wonder where he was or who he was with. I knew, and knowing changed everything. Tomorrow, I would begin with the accounts, the paperwork, the quiet steps that would turn his lies against him. But for that night, I allowed myself to feel the weight of what I had seen and the clarity that came with no longer pretending. I didn't yet know exactly how far I would go, but I knew this Jason Carter had written the first chapters of our marriage. From now on, I would be the one holding the pen. And soon enough, he would learn what it felt like when the story no longer belonged to him. That night, after the hotel lobby, I sat alone at the kitchen table with every light off. My phone buzzed until the counter trembled, Jason's name flashing again and again across the darkened screen. I couldn't bring myself to answer. For years, I had been the wife who picked up no matter the hour, who listened through excuses and patched over disappointments. But that night, silence became my reply. I stared at the faint glow from the refrigerator door and realized I didn't need to ask him why anymore. I had seen enough. The hours stretched until dawn, and with each passing minute, grief softened into something heavier but more controlled. I pulled the safe from the closet, dragging it to the table where I had once set dinners that grew cold while I waited. Inside lay documents I had rarely touched: deeds, titles, accounts. I spread them out in neat rows until the table looked like a chessboard. My inheritance had helped secure more of it than Jason ever admitted, and staring at those papers reminded me that this life wasn't just his. It was ours, built on sacrifices I had made in silence. I opened my laptop, fingers steady as I navigated through our joint accounts. The history spilled across the screen: hotel charges, restaurant tabs, a jewelry purchase I had never seen. My chest tightened, but my hands didn't shake. I froze the credit cards one by one, not locking him out completely, but shifting control back to me. He would discover soon enough that his convenience no longer ran on my trust. Then I pulled up an email draft I had saved months earlier for a divorce attorney named Susan Whitaker. I had never pressed send before. That night, I did. The house was quiet when Jason stumbled home the next morning, his tie loose and his shirt wrinkled. He stopped in the doorway looking at me with bloodshot eyes. "Mariah, please." He started, his voice breaking. "Let me explain." I didn't rise from where I was packing a box of my own belongings. "You've explained enough," I said, sealing the lid with a strip of tape that sounded louder than his words. He stepped closer, desperation leaking from every gesture. It wasn't what it looked like. I made a mistake. A stupid mistake. Don't do anything rash. I set the tape down and stood meeting his eyes. Rash. You think this is rash? I've given you years. My loyalty, my family's money, my inheritance. And you spent it all chasing yourself. Don't tell me about rash. His mouth opened, but I cut him off, lifting the stack of documents from the table. The accounts are frozen. The cards won't work. The house isn't yours to gamble with, and I have copies of everything. The color drained from his face as he realized how fast I had moved. He had expected tears. Instead, he found preparation. When I walked past him with the box, his hand shot out to grab my arm. I pulled away, my voice even. "Don't touch me unless it's through a lawyer." His face crumpled, but I didn't pause. I carried the box to the car, slid it into the trunk, and drove off. For the first time in years, clarity settled inside me like a steady flame. Not joy, not yet, but purpose. In the rearview mirror, Jason stood in the doorway with his hands on his head, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. That image stayed with me. 2 nights later, the first sign of my new control arrived. My phone buzzed with a notification, 3 failed attempts on the joint card at a gas station, each within minutes of the other. I pictured him at the pump, sliding the card again and again, sweat forming at his temples as the clerk watched with pity. Jason hadn't carried cash in years, too used to waving his plastic like a badge of power. Now the badge was gone. The next morning, his voicemail was curt. "Mariah, this has gone too far. You can't just cut me off like this. Call me back." I didn't. Instead, I let the silence do the work. Word travels quickly in circles where image matters. Within a week, a mutual friend reached out. "Is everything okay?" "Jason looked rattled at lunch yesterday." I didn't answer. I wanted whispers to spread without my hand guiding them. And they did. He was unraveling in places I didn't even need to see. One evening, I returned to the house to pick up more belongings. He was pacing the kitchen with the phone pressed to his ear. "No, listen," he whispered. "I'll get the funds. This is temporary. My wife is being difficult, but I'll handle it." I set my keys down with a deliberate click, and his head whipped around. He froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color. I didn't say a word. I simply picked up my box and walked past him. Silence followed me from room to room, heavier than shouting ever could. Even the mistress wasn't immune. A colleague of mine spotted her at brunch with friends. Instead of admiration, she drew whispers and sidelong glances. My friend said she looked miserable stabbing at her food, while her companions laughed at something she wasn't included in. Sleeping with a married man didn't make her envied. It made her a spectacle. Jason's family began to notice as well. Evan, his younger brother, appeared at my door one evening. "I don't know what's going on," he said awkwardly, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "But he looks like hell. Whatever he did, I'm not blind. You've got people on your side." His words hit deeper than I expected. For years, I thought they only saw me as the outsider. Now the tide was shifting. Jason grew desperate. One afternoon at the grocery store, he appeared suddenly stepping in front of my cart. His shirt was wrinkled, his face unshaven, his eyes frantic. "We need to talk," he said, gripping the handle. I straightened and told him to move. "Mariah, please, you don't understand what this is doing to me. I can't access my accounts. My cards won't work. People are calling me every hour." "Just stop this. We can figure it out. I'll cut her off." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "Cut her off. That's your offer." His jaw tightened. "You're destroying me." I leaned closer, my voice steady. "No, Jason. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure the wreckage lands where it belongs." He let go of the cart as though it burned. A mother with a toddler froze mid-step watching us. A man holding grocery bags raised his eyebrows following the scene. The humiliation washed over Jason in real time, his shoulders sagging as though even strangers could see through him. I loaded my groceries into the trunk with deliberate calm, each movement reminding him he no longer controlled the story. When I drove away, he stood staring at the asphalt deflated. That night, I realized something had shifted. Jason wasn't just losing money or reputation. He was losing the script of his life, the one where he was always the man, admired, the one in charge, the one untouchable. Now, for the first time, people pitied him. And pity is its own kind of ruin. The steps I had taken, freezing cards, holding the documents, refusing his calls, were only the beginning. I didn't need to raise my voice. The silence and the evidence spoke louder than anything I could say. But deep down, I knew this was only the first phase. There were bigger battles ahead, ones that would not end in whispers at gas stations or awkward run-ins at the grocery store. I was no longer the woman who waited at the window. I was the woman who had seen the truth and chosen not to look away. And soon, Jason would understand what it meant to be exposed not just in front of strangers, but in front of the people who knew him best. It was Diane who called me, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Mariah, come to Sunday dinner," she said. "Please, it's time." Normally, I would have found an excuse, but something in her tone pulled me in. I wanted to see what time meant in her eyes, so I agreed. The house smelled of garlic bread and roasted chicken when I stepped inside, the kind of warmth that once made me feel folded into the Carter family. Diane greeted me with a squeeze of the hand, relief flashing across her tired face. Robert nodded from his chair, stiff but not unkind, and Evan gave me the kind of smile that said without words that he was glad I came. Plates clinked as cousins shifted in their seats, and the table filled with small talk that felt rehearsed, as though everyone was waiting for a cue. Jason arrived late as usual, but this time he wasn't alone. She walked in behind him, the woman from the lobby, trying to carry herself with poise, but shrinking under the weight of so many eyes. The air went brittle. Diane dropped the serving spoon back into the dish with a sharp clatter. Robert's jaw tightened as he pushed back in his chair. My chest tightened too, but instead of crumbling, I smiled a calm, deliberate smile that belonged to me alone. Jason cleared his throat and started, "Everyone, this is—" I cut him off before he could say her name. "We know who she is." Gasps rippled through the table. The mistress shifted uncomfortably, her hand twitching toward Jason's arm, but he didn't take it. His face had already gone crimson. I rose slowly, glass of water in hand, the scrape of my chair against the floor, pulling every eye toward me. "Do you know what today is?" I asked the room. Silence followed. It's been 2 weeks since Jason told me he had to leave for a business trip. The same trip that ended with me standing in a hotel lobby, watching him walk out of an elevator with her. Robert swore under his breath. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Jason's mistress froze, wide-eyed and pale. I turned to Robert and asked quietly, "Do you know what your son told me when I confronted him?" "He told me not to make a scene." I let the weight of those words sink into the room. Jason shifted, fumbling for words, but I lifted my hand to stop him. I didn't need to raise my voice. The power of silence was mine now. Then I set my water glass down with a sharp clink. "I suppose loyalty is optional for him," I said, letting my eyes rest briefly on the mistress. "But as of tonight, so is this marriage." My words landed like a hammer. Robert rose from his chair, anger etched into every line of his face. "You brought her here?" he thundered at his son. The mistress recoiled, looking toward the door like she wanted to vanish. Jason tried to speak, but nothing came. Diane's voice shook as she shouted across the table. "I'm ashamed of you!" Evan slammed his hand down, demanding to know how long it had been going on. His sister, seated across from me, shook her head in disgust. The voices clashed, rising in fury, but I remained standing calm and composed, watching Jason unravel in the storm he had created. When the noise reached its peak, I picked up my purse and spoke over them, my voice slicing through the chaos. "You wanted to play house with her, fine, but don't forget you've lost a wife, a family, and your dignity in one night, and you'll never get them back." Then I left the table and walked out into the night. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing with messages. A cousin wrote, "Everyone is talking, you destroyed him." Evan sent another, "He deserved every second. Don't stop now." I didn't need their validation, but the words told me the tide had turned. Jason wasn't just failing in my eyes, he was failing in theirs too. It didn't take long for word to spread beyond that dining room. Someone had recorded part of the scene on their phone, and within days, my line about loyalty being optional was circulating in group chats. Soon, it slipped onto Facebook, shared by neighbors and co-workers. One afternoon at a coffee shop, I overheard two women whispering about the man who brought his mistress to Sunday dinner. They didn't know I was standing behind them. The humiliation wasn't mine anymore. It was his. His colleagues saw it. His neighbors whispered, and even those who once admired him began shaking their heads. The life he had built on charm and ambition was crumbling under the weight of his own choices. As for the mistress, she didn't last long. A week later, I heard she'd left him worn down by the backlash and tired of being the punchline. But for me, it wasn't about gossip. It was about balance. It was about reclaiming the power he thought he had taken from me. That night at Sunday dinner, I hadn't just spoken for myself. I had exposed him to the people who mattered most in his world. And from then on, every whisper, every sideways glance, every door closed in his face, carried my silence behind it. Still, I knew Jason. He wouldn't go down quietly. He would try to control the story, to paint me as bitter or vindictive, to claw back the image he prized above everything else. And I would be ready when he did. After Sunday dinner, Jason must have realized just how far his reputation had slipped. Whispers were no longer confined to our family. I started hearing his name at coffee shops and in checkout lines, always followed by a laugh or a shake of the head. He knew he needed to fight back, and fighting back was what he tried to do. The calls began first. Mutual friends reached out to me with a careful tone saying Jason had been explaining himself. He told them I was bitter, that I had misunderstood that the woman at the hotel was nothing more than a colleague. He painted me as unstable, vindictive, eager to tear down what he had built. It was the same arrogance he always carried, believing he could charm people into forgetting what their own eyes had seen. Then came his big move. 2 weeks later, a video appeared on his social media page. I saw it because someone forwarded me the link before I even logged on. He sat behind his office desk, dressed in a crisp shirt and carefully knotted tie, speaking in the solemn tones of a politician caught in scandal. "I want to address the rumors," he began, looking directly into the camera. "My marriage has been struggling for some time, and while mistakes were made, the truth is more complicated than what has been shared. He went on to say he still loved me, that he hoped for understanding, that people shouldn't believe everything they heard. It was a performance one he had rehearsed in the mirror, until every pause and sigh landed just so. The comments rolled in fast, some sympathetic, but most skeptical. People enjoy a show, but they believe proof more than words. And proof was something I had in abundance even if I hadn't planned to use it. I didn't have to. Claire stepped in. She had saved screenshots of his late-night texts to me, the ones where he promised he was working while his credit card showed a champagne purchase at the Marriott bar. She uploaded them to a private group, and from there they spread. "Out of town tonight, babe. Don't wait up," one message read, time-stamped, at the exact moment his card was charged. The contradiction was undeniable. Ava had kept the rooftop photo too. Jason leaning into the blonde woman, glass in hand, smiling the way he once smiled at me in the early days when we had nothing but each other. She didn't post it herself, but somehow it found its way online. It didn't need a caption, the body language was louder than words. Within hours, those images attached themselves to his video, reshared with captions that mocked his carefully chosen phrases. His line about mistakes being made was paired with screenshots of receipts. His solemn face was cropped beside the rooftop picture, with a flame emoji stamped across it. Every attempt he made to look dignified only highlighted the depth of his lies. Then came the hashtag. Someone clipped the line I had delivered at Sunday dinner. Loyalty is optional for him, and paired it with the screenshots. The phrase spread like wildfire, stamped across memes, tweets, and Facebook posts. Optional loyalty. It became shorthand for betrayal, used by strangers who had never met either of us. Jason's name became attached to it, a symbol of the very thing he wanted to deny. The fallout reached his work quickly. A client pulled out of a contract citing reputational concerns. His LinkedIn page turned sour as former colleagues left comments hinting they weren't surprised. A man who had once bragged about being untouchable now stood exposed. His image cracked open for everyone to see. I stayed silent. That was the part that unnerved him most. I didn't defend myself, didn't comment on the leaks, didn't argue with his performance. I simply let the truth speak, and the truth was far louder than any words I could have chosen. The mistress tried to salvage her part of the story. She posted an image on her social media with a vague caption, "People only know half the story. Don't judge what you don't understand." It backfired immediately. The comments flooded in, calling her delusional, selfish, a homewrecker. By the end of the week, she had set her account to private, retreating from the noise she had helped create. Jason grew angrier. One evening, he showed up at my door, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think this is funny?" he demanded, his voice raw. "You're ruining me. Do you know how many calls I've gotten? Do you know what this is doing to my career?" I crossed my arms and stood in the doorway, blocking his way. "You did this to yourself," I said evenly. He lowered his voice, glancing across the street when he realized our neighbor was watching. "You don't understand. I can't fix this if you keep letting people post." A laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it. "Letting people newsflash, Jason, you're broadcasting your own downfall." "I don't have to lift a finger." His mask cracked, then panic flashing across his eyes, and he stepped back. The panic only grew. A week later, an anonymous thread appeared online. Screenshots of him messaging multiple women offering mentorship that always led to drinks, late-night invitations, and promises he never meant to keep. The usernames matched his old email addresses. No matter how he denied it, the digital trail was undeniable. Optional loyalty spread further. It wasn't just a hashtag anymore. It was a meme, a joke people used when talking about cheating. And Jason's face was there over and over again, cropped beside captions that mocked the man he pretended to be. His attempts to craft a story of misunderstanding collapsed under the weight of evidence. For me, the victory wasn't in the gossip. It was in watching him realize that his story no longer belonged to him. In the modern world, stories don't stay in the hands of the guilty. They belong to the audience. And the audience had made its choice. Jason had spent years building a reputation brick by brick, shaping himself into a man admired by colleagues and neighbors. In a matter of weeks, that reputation was swept away, replaced by laughter and ridicule. He had wanted status above all else, but now he was a punchline, a cautionary tale shared in whispers and reposts. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. The silence of knowing he had lost what mattered most to him was enough. My war wasn't about spectacle. It was about reclaiming my dignity. And this was only the beginning. Because while his reputation was crumbling in the court of public opinion, I was preparing for the next arena, the one that carried the most weight. The courtroom. The court filings went in on a Wednesday morning. I sat across from Susan Whitaker, a woman with calm eyes and a steady voice, as she slid the stack of papers toward me. "Once you sign," she said, "it begins." I thought about the hotel lobby, the Sunday dinner, the video he posted with his carefully rehearsed voice. All of it had brought me to this table. I didn't hesitate. My pen scratched across the paper with the certainty of someone who had waited too long. Within days, Jason was served. My phone lit up 13 times in a single afternoon, each voicemail more frantic than the last. His tone swung from rage to pleading, as if switching gears might change the outcome. "You can't just take everything he said in one. I built this life. Please. Mariah, think about what you're doing." But I had thought about it. I had thought about it for years while he told me to be patient, to trust, to look away. Now I was done thinking. Now I was acting. The first blow landed in his wallet. A judge issued a temporary freeze on major assets until the division could be settled. That meant his remaining accounts were under review, his access limited to what the court allowed. The house tied to my inheritance was secured under my control. He couldn't sell it, couldn't borrow against it, couldn't touch it. The second blow came a few weeks later. Jason had been clinging to his car, a luxury sedan he loved to flaunt at client meetings. But it was leased under both our names, and Susan filed to suspend payments until proceedings were complete. The dealership repossessed it. Jason was left scrambling for rides, borrowing cars from friends who grew weary of the spectacle that followed him. The man who once strutted into restaurants with keys to a polished car now stood outside waiting for favors. But the third strike cut deeper than either of us had anticipated. We didn't have children of our own, but Ava had lived with me for years. She was more daughter than niece. A young woman I had guided through school projects, doctor's appointments, and late-night talks when she was scared about her mother's health. Jason liked to parade her at dinner parties, boasting about the role he played in her life. But in court, the truth came out: his absence, his affairs, his financial recklessness. When the judge reviewed the case, guardianship was awarded solely to me. Jason's claim of being a father figure vanished with a single ruling. I watched his face across the courtroom that day. He tried to mask it, but the blow landed. It wasn't just legal. It was personal. For the first time, he couldn't pretend the image he had built was intact. He left the hearing alone, clutching a briefcase that seemed to spill papers at every turn. His suit rumpled, his shoulders hunched. Gone was the man who had once commanded boardrooms. What remained was a hollow version unraveling in plain sight. His family began to peel away too. Diane stopped answering his calls, the guilt too heavy for her to carry on his behalf. Robert showed up at my door one evening, his posture stiff, his words clipped. "I raised him better than this," he said flatly. "What he did to you, to Ava, to this family, it's unforgivable." The weight of his disappointment fell not on me, but squarely on Jason. Even Evan, who had once admired his older brother, cut ties. You embarrassed all of us, I heard, he told him. Don't call me again. Financially, the collapse quickened. Creditors began calling. Business contacts distanced themselves, not wanting to be tied to a name that had become shorthand for betrayal. The optional loyalty hashtag still lingered online, attaching itself to memes and jokes. Each attempt Jason made to claw back control only dug the hole deeper. He filed counterclaims accusing me of emotional cruelty, suggesting I had pushed him to his mistakes. Susan shredded his arguments in court, presenting the receipts, the messages, the photos. The judge dismissed his claims with little ceremony, leaving him staring at the bench as though the ground had shifted beneath him. Every time he tried to twist the story, it slipped further out of his hands. By the time spring turned to summer, the divorce neared its end. The settlement awarded me the house, the savings tied to my inheritance, and half his retirement accounts. He was ordered to pay my legal fees on top of it all. He left with a fraction of what he once flaunted, stripped of the empire he had built on lies. The day he moved out for good, I stood by the window as a battered pickup truck pulled into the driveway. No moving company came, just Jason and two friends hauling boxes into the bed of the truck. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering behind half-open doors. The man who had once paraded through this neighborhood as though he owned it now slunk away, his head bowed. He didn't look up at me, but I didn't need him to. That wasn't my concern anymore. Word spread quickly. Jason had rented a small apartment near the freeway, living paycheck to paycheck after clients withdrew. He had gone from tailored suits to discount racks, from fine dining to takeout pizza. Every support he once leaned on, financial, social, familial, was gone. I didn't toast his downfall. I didn't throw a party. Revenge wasn't champagne and celebration. It was balance. It was the steady knowledge that the weight he had tried to dump on me now sat squarely on his shoulders. When I lay down at night, the silence in my house wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. Still, there was one last chapter to close. Jason wasn't finished trying to pull me back into his orbit. Even stripped of nearly everything, he still clung to the hope that I might be the one to steady him. But I wasn't that woman anymore. And soon he would stand in front of me and learn what it felt like to beg for the very thing he had always denied me. It happened on a gray Tuesday, months after the divorce decree was finalized. I had just left the courthouse after signing the last of the property documents, one more nail closing off the remnants of our shared life. The sidewalk smelled faintly of wet concrete, the air heavy with a drizzle that hadn't yet turned into rain. I pulled my coat tighter and stepped toward the parking lot, thinking the chapter was done. Then I heard my name, Mariah. His voice was thinner than I remembered, stripped of its practiced confidence. I turned, and there he was. Jason stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, wearing a suit that sagged at the shoulders, its wrinkles more pronounced than its color. His face was hollow with shadows under his eyes and stubble along his jaw. For a moment, I hardly recognized the man who once carried himself like he owned every room. "Please," he said, taking a hesitant step closer. "Just hear me out." I could have walked away. I should have. But something in me, maybe the part that needed to see the wreckage up close, stayed. "Go ahead," I said evenly. His throat worked as he swallowed. His eyes darted to the ground before finding mine again. "I know I messed up," he started. "I know I lost everything. But Mariah, we had years together. You can't just erase that. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for the house. His words stumbled. "I just want a chance to make things right, to start over." The drizzle thickened, spotting his wrinkled collar as he rushed on. "I don't sleep. I don't eat. I can't face people anymore. I lost the business. I lost my family." His voice cracked raw with a vulnerability I had never heard from him before. "And I lost you. Please don't leave me like this. You're the only one who can help me put myself back together." For years, I had begged him to come home earlier, to give me more than scraps of his attention, to notice me beyond what I could carry for him. He had brushed me aside, convinced I would always be there. Now, standing broken in the drizzle, he asked for the very thing he had denied me. "You want me to fix you?" I asked quietly. His head nodded quickly, desperation written across every line of his face. "Yes, just give me one more chance. I can change." For a brief moment, I studied him, not with longing, not with pity, but with a clear recognition. This wasn't love. This wasn't redemption. This was a man drowning, clutching for the nearest lifeline, and I refused to be that rope. "You had your chances," I said, my voice low. "You had more than most men ever get. And every single time you chose yourself over me." His face twisted as if my words landed harder than a slap. I was stupid. I was selfish. But I see it now. I see it all now. I can't live like this. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "Then don't. But don't you dare think I'm here to save you. I saved myself the moment I walked out of that hotel lobby. You're standing in the ruins of your own choices." His eyes glistened, and for a second I thought he might collapse right there on the courthouse steps. "So that's it," he whispered. After everything, I let the silence stretch heavy and final, then delivered the only words that mattered. "You're the architect of your own destruction." I turned and walked away, each step firm against the damp concrete. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The sound of his silence behind me told me everything. He had nothing left. No family, no money, no allies, and most importantly, no me. As I crossed the street, the gray sky cracked sunlight slipping through in narrow beams that warmed my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt that light without shadows trailing me. I didn't rush to the car. I didn't let his presence chase me anymore. I moved with the calm of someone who knew the battle was over. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I had once stared at documents spread across its surface, plotting how to dismantle him. Only this time, the table held nothing but a mug of tea and Ava's college brochures scattered across the wood. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of her typing upstairs, these were the noises of a life that belonged to me again. Jason's downfall was complete. The man who once boasted of his empire now rented a cramped apartment by the freeway. The man who paraded women and wealth now stood empty-handed, his name little more than a cautionary tale. His ruin wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sudden. It was steady, measured, and undeniable. Exactly as I had intended. And I had no intention of turning back. When I left Jason standing in silence outside the courthouse, I knew my fight with him was over. For months, my life had revolved around uncovering his lies and protecting myself from the wreckage. But once I walked away that final time, I no longer felt tied to his choices. I came home to a house that finally belonged to me, not because my name was on the deed, but because every corner now carried my touch, not his shadow. I repainted the walls, tore down the heavy curtains he once insisted on, and let the light fill spaces that had felt closed for too long. I added plants to the windowsills, framed photographs of Ava's milestones, and filled shelves with books that reflected my own interests. Slowly, the house transformed from a place of tension into a sanctuary. I realized I wasn't just reclaiming property, I was reclaiming myself. Financially, I found steadiness too. The divorce settlement secured my share, But I didn't stop there. I took the marketing work I once kept small and let it grow. Freelance projects turned into loyal clients, and my confidence grew with every invoice that carried my name alone. What had once felt like survival became pride-proof that I could build a life without depending on Jason's ambition. Ava thrived as well. That spring, we sat together in the kitchen, opening her college acceptance letters. We laughed until our sides ached when the first envelope arrived with a bold congratulations. She hugged me tight and whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you." Her words mattered more than any apology Jason ever tried to force on me. While he chose betrayal, I had chosen commitment to her, to myself, to a future worth protecting. Every so often, I still hear about Jason. Houston is a big city, but not big enough to keep stories from finding me. People say he rents a small apartment near the freeway now, working job to job, his friends gone, his family distant. Diane no longer makes excuses for him. Robert refuses his calls. Even Evan, once his biggest supporter, keeps his distance. His name, once spoken with admiration, has become a quiet warning. He is no longer the man people look up to. He is the story they tell when they talk about pride undone. But that's his life, not mine. My story is different. My days now begin without dread. I walk through my neighborhood in the mornings with sunlight on my face, feeling gratitude instead of knots in my stomach. I cook meals because I enjoy the taste, not because I'm waiting for someone to come home. I sleep peacefully in a bed that feels like rest, not emptiness. I've learned something important through all of this, that betrayal may break your heart, but it doesn't have to break you. Sometimes it clears a path you never would have chosen, but one you're better for walking. Justice doesn't always arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in the quiet, when you finally reclaim your dignity and stop letting someone else define your worth. Jason's destruction was his own design, and I didn't need to carry it for him. My victory was not in watching him fall, but in choosing to rise. And if I could tell anyone listening one thing, it would be this: your freedom begins the moment you stop waiting for someone to change, and you choose yourself instead. Before we close, I'd love to know which part of this journey spoke most to you. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you'd like to hear more true family stories, stay connected here.